Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good morning and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. My name is Alan Diehl and I am I serve currently on the board of the Interreligious Council of Lynn County and also the Vice President of the Humanists of Lynn County. Today we're going to talk about religious differences. Specifically, we're going to look at how those religious differences are formed, how they impact our world, and also how do we deal with these different differences. I think it's no question that there are many differences when it comes to religion. In fact, there was a study completed in 2001 and published in the Christian World Encyclopedia that identified 10,000 different and distinct religions in the world across 238 countries, 150 of them having more than 1 million adherents. So, and then to complicate matters more, within Christianity, there was identified to be 33,820 different denominations. So the point is, there's a lot of different religious belief systems out there. So we want to explore those today, and here to help us do that, we have three panelists that are no stranger to religion. In fact, these three panelists, I'm privileged to serve on the Interreligious Council of Lynn County with them. So I've gotten to know them over the last year or so. So we're kind of brother in arms when it comes to this idea of working together for the common good. And so I wanted to hopefully just have you take a few seconds, tell us a little bit about what you do and why religion is important to you.
Okay. Charles Crawley, President of the Interreligious Council. I work at Rockwell Collins and teach as an adjunct at Mount Mercy University. I was raised Southern Baptist in Texas, and it just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
I'm not a Southern Baptist now, but the Christianity stuck.
All right, very good.
Hassan, Selim, the Imam at the Islamic Center of Cedar Rapids. I've been the Imam there for the last 5 years or so. Also, I have the honor and of serving as the Vice President of the Interreligious Council. And religion is perhaps one of the most important subjects that I'm interested in and have concern for, and so I'm very honored to work with a very diverse group at the Interreligious Council of Lynn County.
And I'm Todd Thalblum. I'm the rabbi at Temple Judah. I've been here now 8 years, and on the Interreligious Council the whole time I've been here as well. Religion, I'm sure like all of us, religion has been a part of my life since I was little, raised Reformed Judaism in a Reformed Jewish household. And I have found Judaism in particular to be very centering and motivational for my life. And so I'm sure that's what drew me to the rabbinate in a lot of ways to help bring it to other people in the community.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, we'll definitely get into some of our differences and also, again, how we work together on the Interfaith Council too. But before we do that, I think we want to start with the very beginning. And when we talk about religious differences, we're using the word religion there, and that implies a belief system, right? So I think the first question I want to pose, and certainly whoever would like to jump in on this, but the idea that a religious belief, does it need to be true? I'm assuming that everybody believes that your religious belief system is true to a certain extent, right? And I was hoping you could explain, what does it actually mean for a religious belief to be true? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? How important it is? How important is that?
I can start on this, and I think that an important, question to actually come before this one about whether a religious system is true or not, or is, what do we mean by true? Do we mean that it's subject to to scientific method of testing and having certain conclusions, or do we mean that it's meaningful and it touches on a deep human experience and our connection with the world around us, and that it gives us access to a world that we perhaps otherwise don't have access to, a world beyond our senses, the world of the unseen. And so I think to qualify the question, we have to ask first, what is true, and versus what is fake or untrue or not true.
And that's a great point. So it's this idea of how does a religious person or a person that subscribes to a particular belief system define truth, right? And Todd, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I was thinking, as you said, I totally agree on your take on true. It's hard to say what is true in religion anyway, true or not true. And Judaism doesn't look for it to be exactly true, or true as in literal, I guess, is where I hear when you say, is it true as in, is it literal? I've never read the Bible as being literal, but I do find truth in it. And I think that there's a difference between true and truth. There's truth in religion, or can be, and it can help you find and define moments in your life. But certainly from a scientific standpoint or a literary standpoint, I've never read the Bible as if it's a literal truth, that direct word, literal, and that allows me some opportunity to interpret and delve into the text and find what's true in the story or what's true in the lesson.
I was listening to a podcast the other day. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the comment was made that people that are more would be classified as fundamentalists when it comes to religion. They actually have a greater appreciation for their religion to be true, meaning they try to take their text more literally, right? So in a sense, they have a greater desire for truth. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, do you have any, Charles, any thoughts?
Well,
when it comes
for me, the problem with fundamentalism is that, and it doesn't matter, there's fundamentalism in Christianity, Islam,
Judaism everywhere, yeah.
You take one book and you take one interpretation of that book. And St. Thomas Aquinas said, beware the man of one book. So we have to look at many books, and to narrow it down to one book, the Bible, and one interpretation of the Bible is just so narrow. That doesn't fit my experience. And the people that I worship with in the Episcopal Church, it doesn't fit their experience either.
Interesting. Yeah, and we're going to get into just some of the, I don't know if I'm going to use the word danger, but I'll use the word danger when it comes to interpreting things literally or some of the extremist interpretations of religion. But before we do that, again, talking about this idea of true, does it matter then, no matter how you define truth, true or truth, does it matter if it is true or however you want to define that, as long as it does bring comfort and security to the individual? I mean, again, I stated thousands and thousands of different religious sects, right, that have all kinds of different belief systems that most of us here probably would not think to be true or feel drawn towards, but those people have a sense of identity, a sense of peace and belonging. Is that really all that matters? Or again, should there be more emphasis on whether what they're believing is actually true or tracks to reality in some way?
I'm struggling with the word true.
Yeah, it is a tough one. Yeah.
I think that religion can certainly be helpful, can certainly be meaningful, and a lot of people find it really helpful and meaningful. That was the example you used in their own lives. For it to be helpful or meaningful or inspirational, it certainly doesn't have to be true necessarily, because there's a lot of things that we find in our lives that are inspirational and are totally fictional in some way. And so I'm true is a hard word for me here, because I don't deal in truth as much as interpretation, as much in lesson, allegory, how we find what's important in the text that we're studying is more important. It's more meaningful to me what's important in the text than what's necessarily true, exactly true anyway.
Hassan, do you have any thoughts there?
I tend to agree with Todd on this point, that having religious systems and religious beliefs subject to the question of what is true and what is not perhaps is a dangerous business, because if we tend to make an extreme judgment that a given religious belief is true, we are denying millions of other human experiences and interpretations, and that can lead us to consequences that are not good. People fighting or imposing their true understanding of their true belief on other people who might not be adhering to this truth.
Same way,
And so the truth, and on the other hand, can have multiple manifestations and reflections. But what is true and what we understand to be absolutely the only form of true or truth is a dangerous business to deal with.
So I think I feel a consensus kind of building here, right, in that the emphasis shouldn't be so much on whether it is true or not, however you define truth, but rather how can my particular belief system help me become a better person in the world, understand the world better, interact, give my life meaning, give it purpose. And there's, for full disclosure, I consider myself a non-religious person, but I also have been raised religiously, right? And I understand the benefit of religion and that sense of belonging, that sense of meaning, that sense of purpose that it does give an individual. And kind of in a counterintuitive way, if you put too much emphasis on whether it is true or not and having to be forced into a literal interpretation, if you will, that can sometimes, push people in unsavory directions. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But before we move away from this idea of what does it mean to hold a religious belief and is it important to be true, when it comes to belief systems, specifically in this case religious belief systems, is there an ingredient there that makes it a religious belief system rather than just a regular old belief system? Because a lot of times I hear that, well, that's your belief and therefore it's a religious belief. Is there something that makes it uniquely religious?
Perhaps a belief in a higher being would be one of the ingredients that qualify to be a religious system, a revelation, and having an access to this higher being through a revelation or a series of revelations. Whether this revelation can then develop to be a scripture or not, that's a different question, but a higher being and a revelation perhaps would be two ingredients that qualify a belief system to become a religion that is later might be organized and has followers.
So some sort of special revelation, general revelation, is required to kind of take it from just an ordinary belief system about the world into something more religious. Would you agree with that, Todd?
Yeah, probably. I think one of the things that distinguishes religion from perhaps science, which you brought up, are we trying to hold religious truth up to a scientific method of some sort? So you can find, truth in science, a lot of people do, and that's something that's also motivating and inspirational for them in trying to figure that out. But they're trying to uncover, the nuts and bolts of the universe in some way and put it in some sort of formula that everybody can agree to. And I think religion is outside of that mold in some way, because there is a certain amount of faith that makes it a religious belief to some extent, that you do have to, that there's a few things you have to take on faith or leaps that you have to just accept mostly within a religious system. Now, of course, I only know, out of the, what did you say, 33,000 of them?
Christian denominations.
Right.
Christian denominations.
And I don't even know so I only know a small number of religions by that standard. But I would think that probably there's a certain amount of some sort of faith that you have to accept, perhaps.
Paul Tillich described religion in terms of ultimate concern. And so actually anything you can take and make it into a religion. And so, for example, I think the way technology is seen now, that some people have made technology into a god. The way people use smartphones and panic over loss of them. And so I think actually you can take anything and turn it into a religion that may be a false god.
You can certainly worship anything, we found.
And that's an interesting distinction. So I want to move on now to religious differences, because there's a lot to cover here. And so I'm going to throw out a blanket statement. I want you to respond to it, whoever wants to jump in. So you hear this a lot, sometimes within the ecumenical community or in a religious community, sometimes the phrase that, or even just talking to people on the street, right? Religions are all basically the same, okay? Do you consider that, again, I'm going to use the word true, do you consider that literally true, or is that just hyperbole? Is that more, what do you think about that?
So, no, I don't consider it literally true. I think that there's a lot of major differences within certain religions. And as I was thinking about this when you asked me to do this panel, what's really a real difference? And so even though I talked about religious mentality has to have some sort of leap of faith built into it, that's not exactly true within Judaism. Judaism sees itself as more so a religion of action and deed, and there's commandments, that the God gave us 613 commandments that we're supposed to follow, and in doing the commandments, that leads us into the religion, into God, into whatever we're trying to find. But the action is more important. And so, the rabbis would say, you don't have to believe in God to be a Jew. You don't have to believe in God to be a good Jew. You just have to do the mitzvot. On the other hand, the rabbis also say, for example, prayer. Traditional Jews pray 3 times a day. So if you don't believe in God, you can still pray. But they'll say the praying in and of itself, going through the action, doing the deed, showing up and doing it will eventually lead you to the faith. And so for me, Judaism was always, you have to be doing the things, and that will lead you to some sort of understanding of why you're doing them or finding some meaning in them, even if you don't believe it right off the bat. And to me, from what I've studied, that's backwards from a lot of other religions, where it says, no, you have to believe in God or in Jesus as your Savior or whatever, that the faith starts, and from the faith it leads you into the action. And Judaism really starts from the other side, that you should be doing the right things first, whether you're doing them for whether you believe in what you're doing, these are the things you should be doing, and then you'll eventually find the meaning in them if you don't know them initially.
To respond to the statement, I think that to some extent I think about it as true, because I think about religion as it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within the human experience, and at the end of the day, we all have very similar experience as humans. We search for meaning, we aspire for this connection with the world around us and for something to organize our world and our lives. And so at the end of the day, I think that almost all religious experiences tend to do this, to give us meaning, to give us answers, to give us serenity and comfort. And to this extent, yes, I believe that all religions are similar. Yes, there are differences, and they are unique to each religion, like Rabbi Todd said. In Judaism, perhaps the emphasis is on practice and rituals. For other religions, it might be on belief. Others might be on both of them. Others might not have, that at all, and just focus on the human being and the connections between the believers and their reactions with and interactions with one another. And so the differences are there, but at the end of the day, it boils down to that what religions offer to us as human beings, and I believe it in this sense it is equal. They are all similar.
So what I hear you saying is you strip away all the practice, you strip away the doctrine or the belief systems. At the kind of the fundamental bedrock is this desire to connect with something greater than themselves, and that kind of manifests itself in different ways, in ever increasingly different ways. Right.
Right.
So that's interesting. Charles, did you have any?
Well, sure. I don't think they're the same, and I think the differences are rather obvious to us. For example, Muslim women wearing the hijab, and I think it's harder to find the commonalities, and that's what we really have to work at. And so we can't just stay in our religious cocoons. We have to get out of them, and I have to read the Hebrew scriptures. I have to read the Quran, and I have to say, well, how does that fit in with the New Testament? And you have to work at that, because it does not come easily.
Interesting. Switching gears here a little bit now, I'd like you to just talk very briefly about a particular unique religious belief that you have, unique to your religion or your belief system, and how that enriches your life. If we could just take a minute and do that, I think that would be good. Hassan, we were talking earlier about something. Maybe you want to start.
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier about the experience of fasting, and now that it's the month of Ramadan, and I'm personally now fasting for a couple more hours, and that's an experience that for others might seem very hard and harsh and cruel, maybe for some other people that giving up food and drink from dawn until sunset. But for me, it's a religious experience that I actually look forward to every year, and sometimes I think that. I think about my religious my religious beliefs or my faith. How would it be like without the experience of fasting for a whole month every year? It would completely be less meaningful as it is now. And so this is one of the religious beliefs that I wouldn't give up, even though it might seem a little tough.
I was going to bring up food too, but I won't talk about fasting. I was thinking of the kashrut, keeping kosher within Judaism, which is a certain system of eating, things that are acceptable to eat and things that are not acceptable to eat. Some of the Jews don't eat pork, and Jews don't tend to eat shellfish typically. And one of the things that I found in keeping in my own level of kashrut, and I'm not as strict as Orthodox Jews with separate sets of plates and specifically slaughtered meat in a certain way. But I do follow the rules that were in the Torah about not mixing certain things and not eating certain foods. And I find that every time I sit down to a meal, I think, okay, this is acceptable to eat. It makes me think about my Judaism, think about my religion. You can accomplish the same thing by saying a little prayer before every meal or something too, which a lot of people do. It's a daily, 3 times a day, sometimes 5 times a day, depends on how much you eat, a reminder of who I am, what my belief system is, a reminder of my Judaism. And so, daily, there are these little reminders because we eat a lot. Fasting would be the same thing, and there's certainly fast days in Judaism that give me the same meaning that they give you. But the food that we eat, and you can make that a religious experience every time you sit down to eat by setting some structure on it.
I think rituals are so very important, religious or non. Very quickly, and I did want to move on to one other thing, but Charles, do you have something you want to share with us?
Well, it's not a belief, but the story in the New Testament, the raising of Lazarus, is very important to me, where Lazarus was dead and Jesus raised him back to life. And for me personally, when a part of my life was dead, I felt that Christ raised me back to life, and that's something I can relate to.
Very interesting. Now, I want to just take it, we just have a few minutes left here, but I want to talk a little bit more about, unless you have your head in the sand, you realize that the world, people do have extremist beliefs when it comes to religion. Right? And sometimes there's a criticism of the left or the progressive, or even that there's a tendency to overlook that to some degree. But historically, if you look throughout history, people have committed acts in the name of religion that we collectively agree to be very unsavory. And today is no different, right? And I read a quote from a man by the name of Graham Wood. He is an American journalist in political science in reference to ISIS, which again, unfortunately, dominates the news. And he says this, and I want to get all your reaction on what your thought is here. Focusing on them, ISIS, to the exclusion of ideology reflects another kind of Western bias, that if religious ideology doesn't matter much in Washington or Berlin, surely it must be equally irrelevant in Raqqa or Mosul. So again, kind of going back to this idea of truth and fundamentally, taking things literally. Respond to that that statement there. Do you think there is kind of this Western bias that, religion is just more of a thing that gives me purpose and meaning, and that people surely don't take it literally, in which it would inspire them to commit acts of violence? What's your thought there?
I can't say I agree with it the way it was just framed there. Clearly, people take religion and use it for extreme acts of violence. In almost any religion they can do it, and throughout history we've seen it from all 3 of the major religions, including Judaism has its own fundamentalism. The assassination of Yitzhak Rabin was carried out by an extremist Jewish group. So, we have the same issues as everybody else. So I would have to disagree. Clearly, religion can send people in really horrible way, off to do really horrible things sometimes. It's hard to separate the ideology from the action sometimes.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, what do we do, again, whether it's an ideology or a religious belief system, if it's my particular ideology or religious system that is in a sense kind of being hijacked and being used, what can we do to help prevent that, suppress that, address that? I mean, is there, and Hassan, obviously it's a concern for you. I mean, you have 1.5 billion Muslims on earth, of which the vast majority are want nothing but peace and love in the world, and yet you have this right now in 2017, an organization that does these acts of violence in the name of Islam. How does that? What do you feel is the proper reaction?
Yeah, I would like to return to what I said earlier about religion not existing in a vacuum. That we also have we have to consider that modernity has brought lots of other problems and issues that humans collectively, but mostly people who are unfortunate enough, they live in underdeveloped or underdeveloped countries. They face horrible issues such as lack of health, attention and care, bad, opportunities or lack of opportunities for future, for employment, and governments that don't really tend to care much about its citizens, and all of this. Religion is just one factor that when you add it to all of these issues, it can be a vehicle for people to express their frustration and their anger. And that's something we kind of tend to discuss only religious ideologies as the factor and the motivation for acts of atrocities and extremism. People suffer, and for them, religion can either be something that gives them comfort, or it can be something that gives them a way to express their frustration in violent ways, sometimes in the most peaceful ways. And so, it is not the religious ideologies per se that lead people to commit these acts. And so, we really have to look at the end of the day, not the religion, but the human who believes in this religion. Humanity always should come before religiosity.
So I think you're promoting kind of a holistic approach to it, correct? Right? I mean, you can address the ideology or what you feel is kind of, somehow motivating this, but at the same time address the other societal, economic, political, other concerns there that might be kind of creating that perfect environment. That's very, very interesting. Thank you so much. Is there any other comments on that before we?
Well, I would think what helped moderate all of our religions in the Western world, in the developed world, in the Western world was a secular system of government that had a baseline of equal rights, human and accepted. All humans are equal, right? That we have to start with a baseline. We can't. My religion can't tell me how to impose it on you in some way. And what I think is unfortunately happening in a lot of the undeveloped world is there's a religion that's trying to also run the secular world, and they can say, no, you're not one of us, so you're lesser in some way, and it allows people to do horrible things. And what helped in the Western world was to say, no, there's a government that's going to protect every citizen, and that you can't impose yourself on this other person, and that helped moderate to some extent everybody else's.
What's different from in the United States, where religious conservatives are using a president right now to force their point of view as well.
Yeah, which is unfortunate.
Well, we have just another minute left, and I mentioned at the beginning that we are all on the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, and as part of that, we work together for the common good. We have differences religiously. We certainly try not to hide those, but I think the point is that despite our differences, and this could be for every person, right? We can come together, agree where we disagree, move on, and work for the betterment of our communities and the greater world. So I think that's the lesson can be learned. So this has been a fascinating discussion. Maybe we'll have a part two, but again, thank you for joining our show this morning. We hope you join us next week as we discuss more issues that are important to your life. Thank you.